In this video, I'm going to break down enlightenment in a very common sense, very easy to understand, very practical way. I'm going to basically challenge the idea that in order to be enlightened or have spiritual insight or spiritual realization or evolve to higher consciousness or Buddhahood or sainthood or whatever it is you want to call it, the assumption that you have to spend lots of time and years and sacrifice and suffer in order to get that, to me is just absurd and silly and is ultimately just a delay for the actual realization, because the actual realizations of all of those characteristics, Buddhahood, sainthood, enlightenment, whatever, they're all very simple, they're all very easy, they're right in front of you all the time, they're all around you all the time, they're already in your mind, they're already so obvious that we ignore it. Much like a fish knows little about water because it's immersed in it, much like we know little about air because we're immersed in it all the time. So a lot of people get on the path of enlightenment or spiritual growth or insight or realization or whatever, and they think this is going to be hard, I need a guru, I need to do this, I need to meditate, or oh, I'm bad because I don't meditate enough, or I don't do this practice enough. And ultimately that's all crap and an excuse and a waste of time. The whole idea that you need a guru or you need someone higher than you basically just indicates that you haven't really gotten the point and you still are just delaying the process. So the main thing we're going to talk about in this video is the whole idea of interconnectedness and non-separateness, and how everything is ultimately one and the same process, and how we often think how it's going to be a hard time before we can actually realize that. So I'm going to give you some examples where you can realize this right now, sitting where you are in the next 1 or 2 minutes. You can achieve what some people supposedly take years and lifetimes to achieve. Now, when it comes to positive thinking and only thinking good thoughts and only having good karma and all of those things, most people think there's some grand spiritual goal or there's some karmic universal bank account that we're depositing and subtracting from. But ultimately that's junk and crap and a waste of time and isn't really empowering us at all. So what's really empowering and what's ultimately obvious and what's ultimately the point of all of those teachings is that, for example, when you think negatively about someone, or when you get angry at someone, or when you want to just beat someone up, or you want to steal from someone, or you want to lie to someone, who is it that really feels bad in that situation? It's you. You're the one that's experiencing the negative emotion, not the other person, unless you actually do something to harm them. They're not experiencing anything. So when you're pissed off at the person and you're thinking, why would they do that? Why are they such this? Why are they so that? I can't believe they're this. Ultimately, you're by yourself, probably in a room somewhere, probably in your car, and the person's away and doesn't even know, doesn't even care that you're thinking about them. So you're basically just torturing yourself. So it's not that you should get rid of all of these negative thoughts and negative emotions because it's good for your karma, it's good for the universe, it's good for your next reincarnation. You should ultimately move away from those things because you're just beating yourself up. You're just torturing yourself. You're just harming yourself. It's pretty easy, it's pretty simple to understand, but it's so obvious that you didn't see it. You never saw that, oh, when I'm experiencing all these negative things, I'm the one that's feeling the contraction and the pain and suffering the negative consequences. Not the other person. Has nothing to do with them. Has more to do with me than anything else. So that's ultimately that whole spiritual teaching that people talk about for hours and hours and hours and think, oh, you got to meditate, you got to cleanse, you got to purify, you got to fast, you got to do all these things. Ultimately, that's all just for ego. That's all so you can say, you know what? I did a 40-day fast. You didn't. I'm better than you. I'm more spiritual than you. God loves me more than He loves you. Because I did a fast, I did a cleanse, I'm more dedicated, you're less dedicated. That's basically the process behind most of the people that are doing these kinds of really extreme, really aggressive disciplines. Now, I'm not saying those are good or bad. Some people need those. There's short paths and long paths because there are people who need a long path and some people need a short path, some people need a quick path, some people need a slow path. They're all good, they're all okay. But it's ultimately, what do you want? What's right for you? So this whole idea of interconnectedness, that everything's one, sounds like this grand, lofty, whoa, amazing, far out spiritual whatever. But ultimately it's so obvious, it's crystal clear, it's in front of you all the time. So the next concept that I want to talk about is this whole thing of like reincarnation and past lives and all of that whole conversation. And the way I'm going to illustrate it is just simply, I'm looking out the window, there's a tree right there. So you got to think, what's going to happen very soon in the next couple of months? All of those leaves are going to fall off the tree. The tree is effectively going to die temporarily because, that's what happens in autumn as things go into winter. So you think, oh, well, those leaves just died. But what happens? Those leaves die and decay, much like everything in this physical reality dies and decays, but it goes down into the earth, and then organisms from the soil, bacteria, worms, whatever, they eat that. So that feeds them, and then they turn that into fuel, and then other things eat that, and then it becomes fertilizer, and then new life grows out of that. Likewise, when we die, our bodies start to decay like that. Maggots and bacteria and viruses and all of these things just start eating us and recycling us and turning us into food. So our death actually allows millions, if not billions, of other organisms to actually live. So we go into the ground, all of these things eat us, all of these things break us down into, base elements, and then the soil basically takes that, turns it into fertilizer, and then plants and new life in turn grow out of that. Maybe a fruit tree grows out of that, or crops grow out of that soil, out of that fertilizer, and then those crops go and feed thousands of other people eat those things and then excrete that waste becomes more fertilizer, which in turn fertilizes more plants grow, produce more fruit, more vegetables, more people eat more fruits, more vegetables, and then it just goes on and on and on and on and on, and it just spreads. So hopefully from that one example you can understand how this whole reality that we're in is cyclical and it's recycling. And hopefully you can see how effective and efficient it is and how it's not wasting energy. And hopefully you can see how this whole thing of reincarnation isn't some lofty, far-off spiritual idea, isn't something of, I'm such and such reincarnated, or in my past life I was this, I was that, I was a Taoist master, I was an emperor. All of those things, you can see how it's right in front of your eyes. It's happening right now, and it's completely obvious and easy to understand. But because we're so caught up in fairy tales and stories and myths, we don't see the actual physical reality. Because the main point that I want you to take away from this right now is that words, ideas, symbols, myths, stories, legends, all of those things are just fingers pointing at something. And there's a Zen saying that, words, ideas, symbols, concepts are just like a finger pointing at the moon. So what we do is we sit there and look at the finger and say, wow, it's very well shaped. I'm glad I can, move my hand and create this. Look, we get all our friends over and say, hey, check it out. Here's the finger. You see it? Wow, it's amazing. Instead of actually looking up the moon and saying, oh, wow, there's the actual thing that I'm pointing at, and look at that. And actually seeing it, experiencing it in an existential, experiential way. Instead of being so caught up in the make-believe world of symbols and concepts. So I know I've kind of thrown a lot out there in this video. If you have any questions, comments, I'm sure you do, post them below, and I'll talk to you soon.